All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to take a really fascinating, structured look at a philosophy that tackles humanity's absolute oldest questions. Today, we're actually embarking on a metaphorical journey to map out the foundational concepts of Islam, step by step. So let's get to it.
First, I want you to just picture the sheer vastness of the cosmos. Now think about the sweeping landscapes of our planet and the towering ancient ruins of civilizations that have long passed. It's an incredible visual contrast, right? And the source uses it to highlight a universal truth. No matter where or when we pop up in history, humanity has literally always been on this relentless, driving search for meaning.
And, that search inevitably brings us to some pretty massive questions. Who created me? Why am I even here? Does life actually have any real meaning? These aren't just late-night dorm room musings. These are the core existential questions that have driven human exploration and theology since the dawn of time. They're the kind of questions that absolutely demand an answer. So, where are people looking for those answers today? Well, for over 2 billion people worldwide. That is a truly staggering chunk of our global population spanning across countless cultures. Those answers, and their ultimate sense of purpose, are found within the Islamic faith. Now, to really wrap our heads around why this kind of guidance is considered so crucial, the source uses a brilliant metaphor. Imagine a traveler stranded out in a vast, completely unforgiving desert. A traveler without a guide is just totally confused, right? They're aimlessly wandering, dealing with the sheer panic of being lost in this harsh environment. But the second you give that traveler a trusted guide, the entire dynamic flips. Suddenly, you have clear direction, you have safety, and you have that overwhelming relief of knowing you're actually going to reach the oasis. And that beautifully illustrates the central argument being made here. Just as that desert traveler desperately needs a guide to survive those shifting sands, humanity, trying to navigate the crazy complexities and moral gray areas of everyday life, requires divine guidance. Essentially, we are the travelers. Without a reliable map, we risk just wandering aimlessly. It's a really powerful, relatable analogy for the human need for direction.
Which brings us perfectly to how Islam is formally defined within this framework, as the final divine message. If we go back to our desert metaphor, it's essentially presented as the ultimate, completed map for the human traveler. It's not framed as just a random list of rules, but as a comprehensive system that provides the exact guidance and existential answers we need to safely complete our journey here on Earth.
And you really have to notice the chronological arc they use to back up this idea of a final map. It starts way back at the dawn of history, when those big eternal questions first sparked in the minds of early humans. From there, it outlines how previous divine messages were sent to guide specific eras and peoples. And then finally, the message of Islam is presented. But actually, it's not presented as some totally new, disconnected thing. Rather, it's the culminating seal, the final conclusion that builds upon and completes all those previous messages for all of humanity. Okay, let's break this down a bit more. What does this metaphorical map actually look like in practice? Well, it includes divine guidance and very clearly established moral frameworks. It's highly structured. We're not just talking about abstract philosophy here. These are morals and ethics strictly backed by Quranic foundations. And this is probably the most important part for us travelers. These foundations are tied directly to real-world applications. It's designed to be lived and applied to your everyday challenges. So, where exactly is this map taking us? What is the final destination? The source makes it very clear. At its absolute core, the primary objective of this faith is absolute mercy and guidance. That is the fundamental takeaway here. The structure, the rules, the entire map, it is all ultimately pointing straight toward mercy. Now, if you wanted to explore this map further, the text lays out a very specific methodology. First up, you have to acknowledge the need for guidance. Basically, you have to admit that you are in fact that traveler in the desert. Second, you actively seek understanding. And third, and they stress this as being absolutely crucial, you have to learn from authentic, correct sources. To truly get it, you have to cut through the noise and the internet myths and go straight to the foundational, verified texts. And hey, speaking of authentic sources, we should definitely point out exactly where this introductory framework comes from. The material we've just been unpacking in this explainer was brought to you by the Al-Azhar Student Lighthouse channel. They're the ones who developed this whole foundational, metaphorical overview to help introduce these concepts to a much wider audience. Which leaves us with one final, totally massive question. The text drops a pretty wild cliffhanger here that perfectly sets up the next leg of the journey. I mean, you have the map, you know the destination, and you totally get the need for a guide, but who is God in Islam? We're just going to leave that right there for you to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this structured look has sparked your curiosity to keep asking those big questions. See you next time.